In this, I will develop this idea. I will develop now. Markets and the concepts of perfect competition nowadays are being increasingly challenged again. And one plausible driver of this dissatisfaction might be the disparity in wealth observed in many countries, also the destruction of the environment, excessive egoism, individualism, and the so-called elbow society in which everyone seems to think only of themselves. Frequent criticism of this or of the competitive economy is that instead of competition, one should use or rely on cooperation. However, free market competition does not impede cooperation. On the contrary, any company can be seen as a cooperation between different stakeholders to produce a certain product or service. Also, companies can cooperate among each other to a certain extent. However, competition law prohibits cooperation in pricing or other competition parameters. And for good reason. Not only does price fixing between companies limit the freedom of the third parties, and not only does it decrease allocative efficiency, such agreements, which are also called collusion or cartels, also contradict neighborly love because they serve to bundle market power with the principal aim of selling a product at a higher price, but without any improvement. Here we see not all forms of cooperation are favorable for a society. Again, workable competition forces producers to offer the best possible products at the best possible prices to avoid being pushed out of the market. Prices goes down at the minimum point of the long-term average total cost curve. This should be regarded as favorably, as offering good products at good prices is a behavior comparable to charity. In this way, competition causes us to behave as if we loved one another. A student once said, well, we shouldn't call it competition. We should call it perfect solidarity. Yes, competition forces us to be perfectly solidary, to make best products at best prices. To further clarify this, let us examine the following example. The Ibis Hotel Group promised all customers that if a problem is not resolved within 50 minutes, the customer will be given a night's stay for free. One might think, wow, such an offer is a realization of neighborly love. But most probably, Ibis is compelled to make this offer by the pressure of heavy competition in the hotel market. Here, for the consumer at least, competition is wonderful. It forces producers to behave in a way that, for all intents and purposes, represents neighborly love. Of course, it would be better if companies actually behaved like this out of love for their neighbor, that is, out of eagerness to contribute to the common good, and not because competition obliges them to do so. Interestingly, company owners who have realized that earning money is not an end in itself, do so. I will come to this later, back to this later. For everyone else, there's competition. That selfishness and individualism and so-called elbow society are associated with the competitive economy may also have been reinforced by a questionable but frequently heard interpretation of much cited Adam Smith quote. And by directing that industry in such a manner as its produce may be of the greatest value, he intends only his own gain. And he is in this, as in many other cases, led by an invisible hand to promote an end which was not part of his intention. By pursuing his own interest, he frequently promotes that of the society more effectually than when he really intends to promote it. Often this statement is misinterpreted as expressing the egoistic, self-interested behavior of market participants, which, being controlled by an invisible hand, causes the efficient allocation of resources. In fact, in my understanding, the opposite is true. It is despite our selfishness that competition compels us to behave as if we love one another, to offer the best products at best prices, what in economics we term allocative efficiency. It is not selfishness that drives competition. Rather, competition limits our selfishness. Again, Competition compels us to produce good products at good prices, if it works, in order not to be pushed out of the market. Competition compels us to behave as if we loved one another. Selfishness is no virtue, but the opposite of neighborly love and possibly the transcendental cause of all evil in the world. As outlined above, competition promotes allocative efficiency, even though we're egoists. Whenever this mechanism that compels us to behave in this way, to produce the best possible products at the best prices, does not work, we speak of market failures. In fact, all market failures can be seen as a failure of the mechanism to compel us to behave in a manner consistent with the love thy neighbor principle. For example, those who love the neighbor will not collude with competitors to artificially create market power with the objective of imposing prices that the customer would not pay in the state of workable competition. Also, there would be no unfair competition such as misleading advertisement or the abuse of a dominant position. And that will lead us to the next point, or the next part, where I draw the utopian model of an economy based on neighborly love. Neighborly love as a new paradigm for economics. Those who have reflected on the meaning of life might conclude that the true purpose of life is to promote the common good by practicing neighborly love. For Christians, both the Old Testament and the New Testament state as the two highest commandments and God's will to love God and to love another. And the two commandments to love one another and to love God are the same, since God is love. And the commandment to love one another seems to be the cornerstone of many other religions too. Love for one's neighbor translates into treating others as we would like to be treated, not to do unto your neighbor what we would not want to be done on us, as we also can read in the Bible in Matthew 7:12. One could say that loving our neighbor is the perfect realization of Immanuel Kant's categorical imperative, which is, in its best known version, asks us to act only according to the maxim, whereby you can at the same time will that it should become a universal law. However, neighborly love is not just reserved for helping people in distress, proselytizing, warning people of occult practices, or observing the 10 Commandments, which in fact can be seen as the concretization of the wider commandment to love one another. No, neighborly love also compels us to make use of our talents for the benefit of the common good. Part of the realization of neighborly love is therefore also to find our vocation and to make it a profession or a life's work, a life's task, so that we may earn our daily bread with our skills. Interestingly, the German word for profession is Beruf, which derives from Berufung, which means vocation. And the word Berufung itself contains the word Ruf, which means call. So the Berufung, it's God's call for special service. A person's vocation is dependent on each individual, as people have different talents. That we should use these talents derives from the commandment to love our neighbor. As part of neighborly love can be regarded the promotion of the common good by bringing in our divine gifts to the community, as a point already explained, both by Paul and Peter. We have different gifts according to the graces given to each of us. If your gift is prophesying, then prophesy in accordance with your faith. If it is serving, then serve. If it is teaching, then teach. If it is to encourage, then give encouragement. If it is giving, then give generously. If it is to lead, do it diligently. If it is to show mercy, do it cheerfully. A person's vocation depends or is dependent on the individual, as people have different talents. So consider, as an example, a conventional factory line. As much as the worker is convinced that he should be thanked for any added value produced, usually the head of the company perceives that he is responsible for such value creation. The inventor, in turn, believes that the company that has bought his patent is profitably thanks to his invention. In fact, all three are wrong. The company owner, the inventor, and the worker are jointly involved in the creation of value. Everyone has their place in the world. No one can do without the other. The inventor, as a scientist or engineer, often is not a good entrepreneur. The entrepreneur cannot produce products without someone putting them together on the production line. And the worker on the assembly line might not have the talent to run a business. In this regard, every human being can be seen as part or slice of the great puzzle of love that may not be fully overseen or understood by each individual, but through which everyone can still contribute to by consistently practicing neighborly love through his or her talents. This can be deemed a principal part of the realization of neighborly love, because we can help others the most by utilizing the talents we have been endowed with. In economics, this would be described as allocative efficiency, the form of the best allocation of resources, or in the words of David Ricardo, the exploitation of comparative advantages, which are here our individual talents. So when we use our talents and gifts to perform the task we are best suited to, we will promote the common good in the best way possible. Furthermore, one might argue that we harm our neighbor if we occupy a job position for which we were not actually suited, and thus prevent other people from doing this work. Here, to use an expression made famous by Abraham Maslow, another person could reach self-actualization in this role. This could be linked to trying to force a piece of a puzzle into a place it does not belong. This way, we do not only destroy the slice, but also the puzzle will never be made whole again, since the slice will be missing on the location where it was planned to go by the creator of the puzzle. In this sense, the so-called Pareto efficiency will never be reached as long as persons occupy a job in which they do not use their special talents. Pareto efficiency, according to Italian economist Wilfredo Pareto, is another frequently used definition of efficiency in economics. A society is Pareto efficient if it is impossible to reallocate resources so as to make any individual better off without making at least one individual worse off. However, as long as there's just one person in an economy occupying a job in which they do not use their talents effectively, the society cannot be Pareto efficient. The person who holds a job they are not made for improves the well-being of all, including their own, by looking for a job in which they can actually make their special contribution to society. At the same time, the new vacancy gives another person the opportunity to self-actualize and contribute to the common good with their talents. And now we can answer the old and famous question of whether we work to live or live to work. The answer is that we live to work, at least if we agree that we live to contribute to the common good with our talents. Then work is no punishment, but a blessing. From a Christian perspective, and if we make use of our vocation, this offers us the possibility to help God in his creation, to become a sort of co-creator and participate in the divine creativity. Insofar, we can conclude that it is our very duty to use our gifts and talents for the benefit of all, and not only as an exercise through which to earn money. I will explore this idea more fully now. Does it make a difference which parts of our body we make use of? Is it therefore not true that anyone who does an activity not out of love, but only for the sake of making money, is basically prostituting himself or herself? Of course, we have to earn money, but not as an end in itself. Indeed, even Aristotle refused what he called grammatistics, the earning of money as an end in itself. Grammatistics can be seen as the opposite of what Aristotle used to call oikonomia, which is the efficient use of the household resources. Even though the term economics finds its origin in the Greek oikonomia, today, when we speak of economics, we usually refer to what Aristotle described as grammatistics. That earning money should not become an end in itself can actually also be deduced from the teaching of Christ, who encouraged us to do good without expect nothing in return, like in Luke 6:35. This verse has to be read in conjunction with the request to be faithful and not worry about the future. Just as God gave the birds food, he would not allow people to starve. This parable is not a call to idleness or to stop working. Rather, it means that when we do our daily work, we do not need to worry about our livelihoods. Hence, this parable could be interpreted as a call to accept a job because it enables us to make a special contribution to society rather than simply because it pays well. Well, the big question is how to find out what our talents are. We should, as explained above, earn our daily bread with an activity that corresponds to our vocation. This is an activity that gives us personal fulfillment and satisfaction, something we love to do. An activity we love is an activity we would not undertake without expected financial reward. And this is why we can find out what our vocation is by selecting an activity that we would dedicate ourselves to, even if we did not get paid in monetary units for it. Probably a good way to answer the question of whether or not we are employing our talents in a certain job is to ask if we would do this work even on the last day of our lives, assuming we knew that day, what day that was. The motivation behind any activity that we perform on our last day would certainly not be the pursuit of money or recognition. In this way, the founder of Apple Computers, Steve Jobs, once remarked at the keynote speech in Stanford University that everything in life is about love. You've got to find what you love. And this is true for your work as it is true for our lovers. The only way to be truly satisfied is to do what you believe is great work. And the only way to do great work is to love what you do. If you haven't found it yet, keep looking. Wow. In his address, Steve Jobs confessed that since he was 17 years old, he had asked himself every morning that if this day were his last day in his life, would he do what he was going to do this day? And when the answer had been no in too many days in the role, he said then he knew that he needed to change something. On the last day of our lives, we will do only activities we love to do. And these are just activities for which we have a special talent. This is because when we feel that we are doing something very special for the benefit of others, we feel happy. It is precisely serving others with our talents what gives us true pleasure. Indeed, serving others through an activity that someone else might do better is certainly less satisfactory, as we do not feel we have given a special contribution to the well-being of others. On our last day of our life, we will not be pursuing such an activity. This leads us to the next point. There's no clear correlation between happiness and income. Those countries that achieve the highest marks in the so-called Happy Planet Index are not those considered to be the most developed ones. Indeed, in economics, a new discipline has sprung up in recent years, the economics of happiness. But even if we measure development alternatively from GDP, maybe measuring the satisfaction of fundamental human needs using the fundamental human needs matrix of Max-Neff, it is doubtful that development and happiness would be clearly correlated. At the United Nations conference in 2012, which debated on the gross national happiness, there was a sign with a wise inscription. If you want happiness for an hour, take a nap. If you want happiness for a day, go fishing. If you want happiness for a month, get married. If you want happiness for a year, inherit a fortune. If you want happiness for a lifetime, help someone else. Wow. This means if we truly want long-lasting happiness, we should aim to constantly help and serve others. Here, I do not refer to happiness as the superficial materialistic joy we feel after having bought a new car, but a deeper sense of inner fulfillment that might come from the intuitive knowledge that you're contributing to the divine puzzle of love, to again use this metaphor. If we appreciate that the purpose of life is not to make as much money as possible, but to earn money with an activity that we would undertake even without the promise of any monetary gain, and even on the last day of our life, then this will make us truly happy. It will make us happy because we feel that we're making a contribution to the common good. And unlike Aristotle in his Nicomachean Ethics, I do not consider felicitousness, the eudaimonia, to be the highest aspirational good. The pursuit of happiness as an end in itself might even be considered as superficial as the pursuit of money or recognition. Rather, true happiness can be considered as being a compensation for achieving the highest goal, the realization of neighborly love. This can also be actually derived from the German word felicitousness, Glückseligkeit, in which the words happiness, Glück, and soul, Seele, are combined. Felicitousness is the state in which the soul is happy. For many, the only reason to work is to earn money and, in doing so, being successful. Such a rationale fits in the concept of the so-called homo economicus. On the other hand, the economics of love is about serving each other as a way of reaching true and lasting happiness. Although a monetary reward in this model is not an end in itself, we might also be more economically successful if we make use of our talents. A person who uses their talents for a certain task will most likely perform it better than someone who does the same activity reluctantly and only for the sake of gaining money. For example, in the long run, it is foreseeable that someone with a talent for cooking will be more successful as a cook than if he tried to construct machines as a mediocre engineer. Steve Jobs, the founder of Apple, serves here as a perfect example. Some readers might now criticize that there are also activities that one does not enjoy doing, such simple, boring activities. But I'm convinced that, as St. Paul states in Romans 12, every person has gifts, and there are also people who are made to perform simple activities and even prefer to do those because they would be overstrained with others, more sophisticated jobs. Conversely, someone who has a talent for engineering or science will be bored with simple activities that require little concentration. And this person will feel that they are wasting their life and will not undertake such an activity with joy and dedication. And maybe this person would be so bored by this simple task that they would perform to a lower standard than a person who's less blessed with abilities, but who would do the job with joy, feeling that they are doing something useful and in that contributing to the positive development of a society. That is to say, even with tasks that many would be reluctant to perform, others might realize self-actualization and be economically successful. For simple tasks, one too can make a valuable contribution to the well-being of all. This is why there is no such thing as low category jobs, all of great importance. However, I stress here that this is only the case if one was created for such simple activity. Using our talents for the benefit of all as the fulfillment of neighborly love and the transcendental meaning of life might even contribute to the realization of freedom. Freedom, as we learn from Kant, is the state of being unconstrained by other people's arbitrary choices. This also means that the freedom of others should not be limited by our own compelling arbitrariness. Well, that in turn means that we should not occupy a job other people are better suited for. We can understand that the realization of freedom is connected herewith when we recognize that freedom does not necessarily depend on external circumstances. For example, someone sitting in their office all day may be less exposed to the open air than someone in prison who might be allowed to do sports in the prison's yard. However, the person does not necessarily feel imprisoned, at least not if they enjoy and love their job. Instead, they feel that their work is making a valuable contribution to the well-being of all. On the other hand, someone who works the whole day outside, for example, on the construction site or on the field, may feel less free than someone sitting in the office all day if they feel compelled to do the work in order to survive. The difference between a slave and a free man is that the free man is doing his job out of free will, that is to say, voluntary and not only to survive. Serving others with our talents also might reduce individualism. Steadily growing individualism and the so-called elbow society are not a side effect of competition as something. Rather, the elbow society comes about because people do not realize that their purpose in life should be to promote the common good instead of accumulating as much, mostly virtual, wealth as possible. After all, the Bible is true in the fact that we cannot serve God and money at the same time. When we understand this, selfish behavior becomes contradictory. There would be no people working full-time as speculators or living of interest, as these activities do not contribute to the well-being of others, but rather exist at the expense of others. It is precisely because most people have not yet come to this deeper understanding of the meaning of life that we need a workable competition that limits our egoism and its related vices. We can now understand the greed for accumulating ever more monetary units by people who already earn so much that they won't be able to spend their income in a meaningful manner during their lifetime. Well, they do not like their job. It is possible they would not work at all if not for the sake of money. However, the intuition tells them that they are wasting their life. Indeed, because they only work for the money they get, any merit becomes unsatisfactory. No merit in the world can make up for lost time. Making money for those people thus becomes a kind of addiction, where the dosage has to be increased on a regular basis to achieve a short-term feeling of superficial happiness, a small compensation for the feeling of wasting their life. Using one's talents also helps to make the society more just. Plato philosophized on this topic and incorporated it into his theory of justice. According to Plato, justice is when everyone minds his own business and refrains from meddling in other affairs. Using one's talents also helps to make the society more just. In fact, one can deduce the obligation to use one's talents and also the aspect of justice derived thereof from the Bible. Here we learn that God is just and also that God is love. Well, thus infringing against the commandment to love one another is a violation of justice. Furthermore, the Holy Scripture teaches us that there is righteousness when one lives in love and keeps God's commandment. As the use of one's talents for the benefit of all can be seen as a part of the realization of neighborly love, exercising any activity solely for the sake of monetary gain and not making use of our special abilities and talents becomes a violation of the commandment to love one another and thus justice. Mediocrity and, above all, laziness are well-known vices. These may come about from the fact that many people would only do a job in order to earn their daily bread. When they do not love their job and only work for money, they do not undertake it with real dedication and mindfulness. Without supervision, these people do little work or none at all. Such behavior occurs unrelated to pay scale. A good salary alone is hardly likely to motivate an employee to carry out their task more conscientiously if they do not feel joy in the performance of their work. Mediocrity is not found in people who do their work with joy, or at least much less frequently. If all people were to do their work with such a dedication, and above all with love, control would no longer be necessary. The well-used adage, trust is good, but control is better, would be turned upside down. An economy of neighborly love, therefore, also would be an economy of trust. Incidentally, I know a craftsman who is doing well economically, despite having no higher education. He receives big orders and builds entire houses because word is spread that he does good work for a fair price. He also makes a happy impression, which confirms what you have already outlined above. The person who carries out their work with love and dedication ultimately also serves themselves through happiness and economic success. Business owners who've understood that making money is not an end in itself and that their job is to contribute to society through their products and services will behave differently to most other companies. A notable example in Chile is a company that sells latte mineral water. On the label of this bottle, the buyer is assured that 100% of the profit will be donated to charity. Indeed, the brand name's latte comes from the phrase latte tu corazón, your heart beats. And as explained on the label, this relates to the feeling that the purchaser can expect, knowing that their purchase has had a positive impact. The company's website announces that nearly €1 million have been donated so far. There is real potential for this corporate concept to pioneer a new generation of businesses, in my opinion. The fact that all surpluses are donated does not necessarily mean that the owner works completely free of charge. If the owners pay a fair salary to themselves, that is a salary the owner could gain as an employee somewhere else with the same talent, time and knowledge investment, with the same production factors invested, they do not contradict the charitable ambitions, as long as all other surpluses are donated or reinvested. Could all companies operate in such a fashion, in such a manner? The answer is yes, they could, at least if they acknowledged that the purpose of their existence is to contribute to the well-being of society with their products. Such an entrepreneur would be happy to see people using their products because that is what they made them for. If there was a surplus at the end of the year, such an entrepreneur would donate their surpluses and or raise the salaries for the employees or reduce the prices for the products in the following year. This process would truly create shared value. A concept made known by Porter and Kramer. Of course, such an entrepreneur would not exploit a dominant position if they were able to have if they had one. They would also not agree with competitors on prices, that is to say, form cartels. Such behavior makes little sense if one sees the purpose of their existence in living and practicing neighborly love. On the contrary, the entrepreneur would endeavor voluntarily and without competition having to force them to do so, to offer their products at lower rather than higher prices, since they desire to contribute to the customer well-being, and he would not charge interest. Competition law, prohibiting the abuse of a dominant market position, price fixing, and unfair behaviors, which are the three pillars of perfect competition, would no longer be necessary if all entrepreneurs thought that way. Such a market economy would serve people by allowing them the freedom to serve one another. This would truly be an economy of neighborly love. In other words, we may achieve allocative efficiency without the need for market pressure. Voluntarily, all people would offer the best possible products at the best possible prices. And this in turn would nullify many of the reasons for market failure. The economy of neighborly love is an economy in which the wish to best serve one another, not market competition, is the principal driver behind the production of good products at good prices. Without stress and fear for economic survival, production would be efficient. People would be happy because they would feel that they made a special contribution to the well-being of all, and in so doing, provided their lives a greater meaning. Unfortunately, most people are still far away from understanding this meaning of life. Meanwhile, we do need competition and a monetary reform to limit our selfishness. If you want to read about the first part of the presentation, which talked about the inneutrality of money, the problems that this brings about and how these problems can be fixed, I recommend this book chapter, Smarter Money for Smarter Cities. If you want to read about the second part of the development of the economy of neighborly love, I recommend a chapter in this book. And if you want a large book chapter, including both, I recommend this book chapter, Neues Geld für neue Ökonomie, which first talks about the money topic, then about the social and the justice aspects of the inequality that produces this unnatural money, unnatural and unneutral money. And then I try the bridge to the economy of neighborly love. All that I talked today in one text, but it is in German. Thank you very much.